when someone talks about PowerShell or what is PowerShell, PowerShell is a tool. It's not a language or anything. It's a tool provided by Microsoft for administrators to automate things. So whenever you want to interact with your system, you would use PowerShell to do that. If you want to automate things, you use PowerShell, right? Yes, there is a graphical interface. However, if you want to do things in bulk, if you want to really get down to the nitty-gritties, check what's happening with the DLL version, at the OS version, you would use something like PowerShell. It's a tool that Microsoft provides you with, and you can interact with systems. Systems can communicate with each other using PowerShell. For example, over here, I would set up a server. Let's say this is an Exchange server, right? And over here we have our DC domain controller and Exchange. Then you have your mailbox servers, so on and so forth, right? Now, from my DC or from my PC, if I want to connect it to each one of these servers, remoting needs to be enabled. So only if remoting is enabled on these servers, then I'll be able to communicate with them. So then I would open PowerShell on my system, and then I can communicate with each one of these systems and interact with them. Interaction is only possible if PowerShell remoting is enabled on a server. It's a feature. You have to go to roles and features and enable that. Now, using PowerShell, you can communicate with your own system, or you can communicate with multiple other systems out there. All right, and that is why when we run PowerShell commands, when we deal with Azure Active Directory, you're dealing with Microsoft servers, right? So you're dealing with let's use Blue because Microsoft is Blue. So from your system, you're enabling remoting, you're downloading the modules, and you are communicating with Microsoft servers. If you are if you're doing your Exchange PowerShell, then it's with Exchange servers, EXO, and same thing with SharePoint, so on and so forth. Now, on the server, you would have an endpoint, right? So this is an endpoint on the server. This endpoint is made available, and via the API is made available. So you will connect to the API, right? So you can connect to the API from your system using invoke commands, either invoke hyphen web commands, invoke hyphen rest commands, things like that. Now, it's good connecting to APIs. However, the modules you download, like your install hyphen module, Azure Active Directory, or Azure AD Preview, they are wrappers around APIs. So Microsoft provides this in their store. So you would go to the Microsoft site, you can view all the modules that are there. It's in the PowerShell gallery, I believe. So these developers go ahead and create modules. So when I run get hyphen Azure AD user, you are actually interacting with an Azure AD endpoint, right? The Azure AD graph endpoint. So when I run get hyphen MG user, the MG user is for Microsoft Graph. Azure AD user is for Azure AD Graph API. Now, keep in mind the Azure AD Graph API was supposed to be deprecated in June. Now they postponed the date, so it will be deprecated in December, and it might go on further. But eventually, the API or investment in the API will be deprecated, will be stopped, and that API will be deprecated. If that API is deprecated, Microsoft has told everyone to move to the Microsoft Graph API, right? Now, the module is still there. All right. So your Azure AD module, AAD, the AAD module is still there. So you can still go ahead and download and install the module, and you can still communicate with the server. However, eventually, if the source, which is your endpoint itself, is deprecated, the module will also end, right? It'll be very soon that it'll be end of life for that module as well. So I would suggest from now on, people start using either the Microsoft Graph API endpoint, or you use the MG module. Now, modules, like I told you, they are wrappers. So they are wrappers around your API, and that's commands that are downloaded on your system. So firstly, let's talk about what PowerShell is, which comes installed on your system. Now, PowerShell comes installed on every system, which is from Windows 7, I believe, Service Pack 1, and your Windows Server 8. So, if you this is the minimum OS that you need to have PowerShell installed. Otherwise, if you want to install a PowerShell core, you can download it from an MSI package, which you can find online. And PowerShell core, it looks like this. Here, this is PowerShell core. So it looks like a terminal, right? And it's nice, but you can use PowerShell core to work with maybe your functions and stuff like that. You can also install PowerShell core on Linux and your Mac OS. So it's not limited to just your Windows operating system. You can also install it on Linux and your Mac. And there's a Microsoft link. I'll paste this for you in the chat window. You can go through these GitHub links and install it if you have Linux or Mac. Yeah. Then these are your different ways to install PowerShell. If you don't have PowerShell, if you want to upgrade PowerShell, you can just run the invoke command and you can upgrade your PowerShell version as well. If you want to check what is the PowerShell version, you would use this command, which is PS version table. Let's see. Now, oh yeah, one more thing. When I do this, and you saw what this looks like, and this is your PowerShell terminal, right? And lastly, we'll just find out what I look like using. I like using PowerShell ISE, and I can run as administrator. However, if you don't have admin rights on your computer, you can run as a regular user, right? So over here, this is my PowerShell version. You see over here, this is 5.1, and if you want to upgrade it, you run this command, and you can go ahead and install. You can upgrade things like that. Yep. Now, when you are installing things on your system, if you are not an administrator, you would set the scope for what you want to install. So I want to install maybe Azure AD module. However, since I'm not an administrator, I would set the scope to current user, which is my current user profile. From here, I hope everyone knows what the basics of PowerShell are. And since you're all on, I guess, new machines, at least not Windows 7 anymore, you should all have PowerShell. So you can just click on the start window and run either ISE or PowerShell terminal, or if you install core, you can run that as well. I like using PowerShell ISE because you can edit things, right? Over here, I can edit stuff and then run it whenever I want to, rather than running stuff in a terminal one by one. And then you have to modify the entire thing and then run it. Now, we were talking over here about these wrappers. So you would need to install wrappers so that you can, these modules actually, so that you can interact with these Microsoft systems. Let's look at some of the modules that I recommend you'll go ahead and install, right? So over here, this one is PowerShell Get. I'll paste all this for you in the chat window, right? So PowerShell Get is what you can install. These are so that you can download all the required modules. And I'll share this stuff. This is just making installation easier, but the main modules you would install would be your PNP module. Make sure you definitely install PNP module. So here, when I install the PNP module, if now I'm not running as administrator, install it. And yep, it's tab to autocomplete. That's IntelliSense in PowerShell, right? If you want to see what's the next command, always hit an I hyphen, and you can tab if you're in the terminal. If you're not in the terminal and want to see something like this in ISE, just wait for some time, hit a hyphen tab, and you will see what's the next, what commands are available. So over here, if I put scope, I have two, all users, which is for the system. If I'm an admin, I can do this. Otherwise, now I will get an error, right? Because I'm not running as admin. But if I do as current user, I will be able to install this. All right, so I'll paste all these for you all so that you have a base, right? So this one is for your PNP. So I would install that. If you all are into SharePoint, some of you all might be into SharePoint PowerShell, then go ahead and install this module. If you're into Graph, and I really recommend all of you all download and install this module, it's install-module Microsoft Graph, and you install this library as well, MSAL, right? That's your authentication library. So make sure you install both of these, and you should be set for Graph. If you are into Exchange, you want to talk with Exchange, you want to download those, Exchange Online Management is what you would download and install. For Azure or AZ, you can download the AZ module. For Planner, you have a module. For CRM Dynamics, you have a module. And let's see, there are a lot of modules. I'll just provide all these modules for you in the chat window. And something that I believe some of you all have already downloaded and installed are these modules. A module for Azure AD and Azure AD Preview. So like I told you over here, Azure AD Preview is good, not bad, but eventually you would need to move to the Graph module or the Microsoft Graph module, right? Because let's see, let's pick a different color. Because over here, we would move first. First investment always goes into Graph. Then you get modules. So first, uh, actually, you have your API endpoint. So there are APIs. Then you have your, well, the Graph API. Then you have modules that are done. So if this gets deprecated, that means this would eventually be of no use, right? So it would be, I would recommend you all to actually move to either MG Graph module, GRAMG Graph, or you use the API endpoints or use your string, right? So the wrappers have commands like get hyphen, they would have a verb and a noun. So you would have commands like get hyphen mg user, get hyphen mg group. However, if you're interacting with the API endpoint, you would invoke a command. You would invoke hyphen something, right? And you would access your string. APIs always have endpoints, like you have your Microsoft dot something dot something, and a graph has an endpoint like graph dot something. Now you would then go ahead and modify those strings, and then you could run these commands. I will in the future. I would do graph module training as well, so you can also definitely attend those trainings. And for now, this is PowerShell. Yep. Hopefully, all of you all who are on call understood what the basics of PowerShell are. What are the modules and what modules you'll need to install. You don't need to install all of them. Just install the ones that you require. Yeah. Any questions?
No.
All right. Cool. So this session was about just understanding PowerShell, installing PowerShell, why is PowerShell even there, and the background of PowerShell. Yep. In the next session, will probably talk about how to manipulate things with PowerShell. I guess your assignment till next time would be to download and install all these modules, upgrade your PowerShell, and yeah, play around. We'll talk about in the next session. We'll talk about the verbs, the nouns, and how you interact with these modules. Yep. Because modules are commands. You'll import the commands, you run the command, and then what you do with that. How to manipulate objects in that command. Yeah. All good.